So my name's Erin McGuire, and I'm the director of the Feed the Future Innovation Lab for Horticulture. And I'm going to be presenting on what is called the equity principles, which is a paradigm shift rooted in inclusivity. So some of the other speakers spoke about institutional change strategies. I really loved the paper from our first author here. I got to meet Feshian actually at the University of California, Davis, and we discussed this. And I think the equity principles is actually a really nice companion piece where you're calling for a lot of what we're able to sort of suggest in the equity principles. And then, of course, engaging leadership, which Mark talked about, and the need to account for more heterogeneity also comes out in the equity principles. I'll just say a little bit about sort of where I come at this. As the Feed the Future Innovation Lab for Horticulture Director, my natural science home is very much in fruits and vegetables. And we work all the time thinking about biophysical, supply side, fruit and vegetable research questions. But very much my social science home has become here doing innovation and scaling work and thinking about how you can develop effective innovations for moving the needle on positive social outcomes within agriculture research for development. And so this really was exciting work. And so the paper name is called Equity Principles Using Social Theory for More Effective Social Transformation and Agriculture Research for Development. And I want to touch upon, of course, the authorship that Amy talked about. We were so grateful to be given this space within this special issue. Not only do I think the topic is incredibly important and needed right now in this moment, so many people are talking about how we have to be more inclusive, how we have to get to this sort of heterogeneity around our end users being more demand-driven, so this issue really speaks to that. But all of our authors were very early global academic scholars. So while all of us, we're all women, we have, we come from both the global north and the global south. We come from many different disciplines, and we really met at the onset of this paper. So we had to sort of work through our new relationships, figure out how each of us worked together. And while everyone had spent, I think, about 3 or 4 years within the CGIAR, or for me, within USAID. I think only one person had their PhD when we started this paper. And so 2 of the authors are now in PhD programs. I now have my PhD. So yeah, very, very new to this space. And I think that fresh perspective allowed us to have this sort of process of osmosis, which was a really cool experience to be a part of. And so today I'm going to do a little bit of a deep dive into our methods, because I think that was an important part of the process, and our feedback from the reviewers for this special issue really helped us get to a logical framework, which I think is so important when you're trying to engage both natural scientists and social scientists in a proposal for overall agriculture research for development actors and systems, institutional organizations. So, our research questions: are there challenges agriculture research for development actors face in effectively innovating and scaling towards positive social transformation? So this was part of our literature review that led us to some of our questions and informed our research. So, second question: do agricultural innovation system frameworks and agriculture research development tools give sufficient attention to social theory? If not, how can established social theory methods address frequent oversights? And we'll get into these a little bit if you have questions about the questions. And then, given any common themes that might emerge from whether or not social theory has been applied to some of our frequently used scaling tools, how can we first bundle those themes, and then how can we establish standard principles that agriculture research for development actors can universally adopt, irrespective of the AIS framework or agriculture research for development tool that they utilize? So we used a case study methodology where we were able to identify gaps, and then from those emerging themes, we wanted to create a real practical application so that you could use this in any of the institutions or organizations you might lead, any of the tools that you're using, you can apply these equity principles to. So first, the challenge to get to this first question on are we able to incorporate social theory, and does it matter? So first, we are all working towards sustainable development goals as agriculture research for development actors. And these include goals around social equity, improving nutrition, reducing poverty, women's empowerment, et cetera. So in many ways, all of us here, whether or not you're working at the CGIAR, USAID, we're all aiming towards these sustainable development goals, which are social in nature. So we're using agricultural innovations, whether a hard technology or systems innovation, which hopefully we see more and more of, for social outcomes. And so if you want to achieve social outcomes, a really important part of that is considering social theory and drawing from social theory. So what is currently happening? This is what not common, for me it's common, I'm presenting it a lot. This is from a Gender Up paper that is also a part of this inclusive a journal, a special issue. And what is happening when you look at current methods to introduce innovation within a landscape is that you're putting in an innovation and essentially just expecting that it is going to affect everyone the same, or you're hoping that it will. But what we see over and over and over again in the literature is that it doesn't. And so you really have to make sure that you're accommodating for social differences to make sure they have access to the resources they need in order to see the benefit that you're hoping to see. And of course, a lot of our missions is around empowering women, underserved populations, and the intersectionality of those. And I will just mention briefly, right now we have a very technological, linear driven approach where you have an innovation and then you hope to scale it. And you can see that sort of on the left-hand side and into the right-hand figure where it says core innovation. But really, hopefully, and this has come up a lot during our time already, is that we're going to start innovating for the social outcomes and the positive development outcomes we want to see at the onset. So inclusive innovation from the beginning. But because we sort of have this landscape as it is now, we are seeing a lot of negative impacts. And Mark talked about this already. And a lot of this literature comes from the CGIAR, incredible work being done from the gender scientists here at ILRI and elsewhere. But we stand on this and trying to understand, okay, we all acknowledge that there's unintended consequences. Can we give ourselves any agency back in those unintended consequences? So, given that the better off benefit at the expense of the poor, we see this happening in the literature. Non-users have their livelihoods displaced, and women and other marginalized populations do not benefit as much as men. How can we think through perhaps undoing that? And for this paper, it gave us space to say, okay, maybe there isn't enough social theory really being considered. And how can we empower actors to really consider more social theory and apply it in an easily digestible way? One part of this paper that is really important when you're thinking about agricultural innovation systems is that the cases that we looked at, hardly any of them actually engage actors as players. And so you need to map out actors to consider that we might have agency in moving the needle and actually using social theory within our integrated innovation systems. And so actually a group of us, a spin-off, are working on a paper right now where you can sort of create a game board to consider systems change with actors mapped onto AIS. But we touch upon this in the paper. In order to set up whether or not we really can incorporate more social theory. So the general premise, as we go into a little bit more of the methods on how we came up with the equity principles, is that these actors within agriculture innovation systems, they have the power, different actors have the power to make decisions, and ultimately, as I say here, the upstream dynamics really will affect your downstream impacts. So who makes decisions, who benefits? So given that space that perhaps social theory isn't being applied and perhaps there's a possibility to apply it more, we're not quite meeting our goals. Perhaps you all could have said that from the very beginning, but it was an important logical step for our paper to identify. We took 3 commonly used agricultural innovation system frameworks or scaling tools. So we wanted to look at what is commonly being used and then apply social theory to it to understand if there is this gap in applying social theory. And I'll get to the social theory in 1 second. So for a theoretical model around agricultural innovation systems, we use the multi-level perspective model, which you can learn more about in the paper. It's niche, regime, and landscape levels. And it's how a lot of the literature analyzes whether or not innovation is moving through a system or not. And then the practical tools we use, the scaling tools, was one from USAID, which is mainstreamed now through the Feed the Future Innovation Labs, called the product life cycle. And the second one is scaling readiness, which Mark presented on and is now being scaled up to IPSR. And the work that I do in Gender Up is very meant to be, of course, overlaid in quite a few of these, but specifically for scaling readiness as well. So we took these case studies and we said, okay, if you were to apply these social theories, would there be gaps that might emerge within these commonly used frameworks? And these are the social theories, although there's many that we could have chosen to use. We felt that these had the most explanatory power within the unintended consequences that we saw within the literature, and also that made the most sense within the agriculture research for development ecosystem that we work. I just want to pause here, as someone who works very often in the natural and social sciences, is that when you see these theories, I think some of us have a feeling that comes with them. So I think it's just good to acknowledge the feelings that might come when you see the word feminism, or decolonial, human rights, power theory, etc. Some of you might be looking at it and being like, oh, this is so exciting, it's really good to overlay that, it's good to utilize these tools. Some of you might be seeing these theories now and being like, oh, okay, that's really interesting, but all right, it doesn't apply to my work, I know that now. However, we are making the case, of course, that this does apply. And these are really important social theories that have been validated for decades, both on a theoretical level, but also on an empirical level, over and over and over again. So these are important tools for us as we try to make social change. So we apply these lenses. I'm going to walk you through the framework now, that you have a little bit of a background. So we start with the case study. We want to do an in-depth look at these regularly used tools. We take the social theory lens and we do a social analysis on each of these case studies to see if any gaps emerge or if these theories are maybe accounted for. We then identify the gaps with the social analysis and we synthesize the themes that emerge. And what emerged from those synthesized themes of things that are not being accounted for if you consider these social theories are power dynamics and agency and recognition. So power dynamics, reflexivity is not being incorporated into these tools or into these theories, including just the idea of actors themselves. Comprehensive social component guidance, so like how do you actually engage ideas around gender, intersectionality, et cetera, like there's no tools that are suggested. Cultural and social norms integration, social equity and inclusiveness, operationalization, and local application. So these are all themes that emerge that aren't necessarily present in these regularly used tools. And from there, we responded with the equity principles. So how do you address these emerging gaps on sort of a systematic way? And we did that by suggesting the equity principles. So, in my last moments, or a couple minutes, I will talk about the 7 equity principles, except for I'm only going to talk about 5 for time's sake. You'll have to read the whole paper to get the 7. I know you all will be pulling up immediately afterward. So first is identifying power dynamics. I think this is, yeah, okay, if you didn't get that picture here. I also want to say that this presentation and also some of the graphics you've seen, I want to say that I think Kristen left, but Kat and Kristen have helped with this presentation, and so your response to that picture, I think, will be met with gratitude. But yeah, so identifying power dynamics is incredibly important, whether or not it is in the field where you're considering how these how you're actually getting local contacts and expertise. We have heard that over and over again, how much that matters, that heterogeneity and getting those voices and local knowledge engaged. but also how you're managing it from an upstream perspective. The equity principles is a lot about upstream engagement. So you as a leader, let's say all of you are leaders, how do you engage all the right voices? How do you get the right people at the table? How do you make sure those voices are heard? And for each of these principles, there's practical suggestions in the paper. So 2, which I think is one of the most important, is defining your goals, your anti-goals, and for whom. I think if we could just incorporate this suggestion into our agriculture research for development processes, we could make a huge difference. So the goals and for whom, we often are just setting out with a goal. We want more income, we want better nutrition, we want more productivity, but for who? And the sustainable development goals are really clear. CGIAR high-level goals are really clear that we are moving the needle on these more marginalized populations. And once you add the for whom, those landscape, social level opportunities and challenges, as I showed in that illustration of the people trying to reach for the fruits and vegetables, really comes clear on how the innovation might change and how the scaling plan might change. And the last concept I will bring up here is anti-goal. And this really comes back to the agency we have as agriculture research for development actors to avoid unintended consequences. So, okay, you want to increase productivity, but at the same time, you don't want to increase inequality. So when you're making your plan, okay, make your plan to increase productivity, but also just think about how you don't want to do more inequality, and what kind of actions can you put into your project plan in order to ensure that. Acknowledging social differences certainly spins off that, and we've heard a lot of it today already. As we try to make movement on social goals, you really have to consider these social differences. And in a lot of the scaling tools we have out there, the innovation system theory, we just aren't considering these social differences. And how much more effective could we be if at the onset we're engaging these social theories and how different populations might engage with the innovations we're developing. Okay, and then innovate and curate innovation appropriately. This speaks very much to Mark's work, and Mark and I work very closely together. Mark's been very generous to have me be a part of his IPSR team, so I get to offer lots of advice on this topic. But really, when we were thinking about innovation, and it goes back to that illustration I showed as well, and I'm almost done here, I'm monitoring my own time. The best is to innovate at the beginning for the outcome that you really want. We see, I think all of us can relate to having a baby innovation, and once you've had that baby innovation for a while, you really want to nurture it and make sure it succeeds. So it's very hard to, I think, disregard an innovation once you've been working on it for years and years and years. So if we can innovate from the beginning, for many different reasons, it's better for social outcomes. And then curating appropriately. So as we develop these platforms and databases, really ensuring that we are collecting data on how that innovation is going to engage with different populations. And I've said to Mark that I think we need this third axis on scaling readiness. So it's use, it's readiness, and then how ready it might be for different populations. And then finally, developing inclusive systems capacity. This also isn't really a part of the tools that we use, but as agriculture research development actors, I think it's really important to improve our own capacity to understand inclusivity and what it means to be effective for different social groups. We don't really add the whom, and we talk a lot about capacity strengthening in the field, but upstream capacity strengthening is so important if we're gonna do this from a systems perspective. So I will close just with this last slide. These seem like easy recommendations somehow maybe, or like common sense, and you wonder why they're not already integrated. And so these are some hypotheses that we have in the paper that we sort of leave the reader with about future areas of research. So we hypothesize that there's complex power dynamics going on, natural science, social science, global north, global south. There's systemic biases. We compartmentalize structural challenges, saying sexism is in the field when we deal with sexism as agriculture research or development actors, et cetera. And just as Mark said, we really need to increase, I think, our diverse perspectives. And finally, I will leave you with the most dangerous phrase in the English language is we've always done it this way. And so the equity principles is about changing our mindset in an easy, practical way and something you can incorporate now. So thank you.